Hi there, it's Jacob from Curious Kid Podcast with a quick announcement. Next week is the third season finale of Curious Kid Podcast. We had a plan for the podcast that included playing the recordings that some of our listeners sent over earlier this month, but we are making some changes. We had lots of requests to get curious about the coronavirus, as it is a topic that is on the minds of many of our listeners. As a result, we will be getting curious about the coronavirus as part of our season finale next week. Thanks to everyone who sent us a recording for the finale. If you want to say hi to us, please continue to do so by sending your recordings to CuriousKidPodcast@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail at 856-425-2324. We have already sent emails to the 3 winners of our Season 3 finale contest and will include their amazing recordings in our Season 4 episodes. If you want to hear your own voice in one of our upcoming episodes, reach out to us by email or voicemail and say hi. Enjoy the show. Hello, and welcome back to the Curious Kid Podcast. I'm really excited about this episode because we have a very special guest that Olivia will interview in a few minutes.
I love it when we have guests on the podcast.
So do I, and this guest is a bit different than any other guest we've had before, and that's because he sees things a bit differently than many other people. He also has a wonderful podcast of his own that I'm going to tell you more about at the end of the show.
Mailbag!
Mailbag! This week's mail comes from the great state of Kentucky. It says, "My name is Anna. I am 6 years old and live in Kentucky. My pops is colorblind and can't even see sunsets like I can. Do you think you could be curious about color blindness on a future show?"
Thanks so much, Anna. We are going to get curious about color blindness for you and your pops.
That's right, but even better, we are going to interview your pops in just a few minutes. Pops is the nickname Anna uses to refer to her grandfather Greg, and Greg is colorblind. Colorblind is a term used to describe someone who has trouble seeing the differences between certain colors. Greg has the most common type of colorblindness, which is red-green colorblindness.
That means Greg has trouble seeing the difference between the color red and green.
This week, we are going to learn more about what colorblindness is, how common it is, and what it's like to live with colorblindness. But before we do all that, what's the question of the week?
The question of the week is, how does someone with red-green color blindness see the lights on the traffic light when they are driving?
That's a really interesting question. Many of you already know that on a traffic light, red means stop and green means go. If you aren't able to figure out which light is lit, it could be very dangerous. How do you think you would drive safely through a traffic light if you couldn't see the difference between red and green?
Color blindness can also be called color vision deficiency.
That's actually a better term for it. When someone is blind, it means that they are unable to see anything. People with color blindness can see everything. They just see some colors differently than other people. For that reason, color vision deficiency is a better description because it means that they can see everything, but they have trouble telling certain colors apart.
How common is color blindness?
It's not very common, but there is something really interesting about how common it is. For women, the likelihood of being colorblind is only 0.5%. That means that out of 200 women, only one will be colorblind. Here's the interesting part. For men, the likelihood of being colorblind is 8%. That means that out of 200 men, 16 of them will be colorblind. In other words, you are 16 times more likely to be colorblind if you are a man than if you are a woman.
Why is there such a big difference between men and women?
The answer is a bit complicated, so it's time to get your thinking caps on. Humans have genes that help determine things like what we look like, how healthy we are, and what our personality is like.
I love wearing jeans, but they're not as comfortable as sweatpants.
Not those kind of genes, silly. I'm talking about genes, spelled Genes. Well, these genes that help make us who we are can be found on things called chromosomes. Each one of us has 46 chromosomes that are paired up to make 23 pairs of chromosomes. The chromosomes can be identified as X chromosomes or Y chromosomes.
All women have 2 X chromosomes.
And all men have 1 X chromosome and 1 Y chromosome.
Red-green colorblindness presents on an X chromosome.
So let me tell you what all this means. If you are red-green colorblind, that means that one of your X chromosomes is not normal. The problem for men is that they only have 1 X chromosome. In other words, if that 1 X chromosome is not normal, that man will be red-green colorblind. Women, on the other hand, have 2 X chromosomes. If one of their X chromosomes is not normal, but the other one is, that woman would not have red-green colorblindness. Because red-green colorblindness is a weak trait, also referred to as a recessive trait, a woman would need to have 2 X chromosomes that are not normal in order to have red-green colorblindness. And while we're talking about genetics, here's another really interesting fact. If a mother is red-green colorblind, all of her sons will be red-green colorblind. But if a father is red-green colorblind, he cannot pass it on to his sons.
Do people with red-green colorblindness have trouble seeing any other colors?
They do. In order to better understand the other colors they have trouble seeing, it helps to know what the primary colors are.
The primary colors are red, blue, and yellow.
That's right. Primary colors are important because they are how all the other colors are made. One of the primary colors is red, which is one of the colors that people with red-green color blindness can't see well.
Red mixes with blue to make purple, and red mixes with yellow to make orange.
And what's interesting is that people with red-green color blindness will also struggle with colors like purple and orange because those colors are created by mixing red with other colors.
So they would see purple more like blue, and they would see orange more like yellow.
That's exactly right. Being red-green colorblind makes it harder to distinguish between many different colors, not just red and green.
Did you know that all babies are colorblind?
That's really interesting. As they get older, they start seeing colors better. And by 6 months old, their vision is usually fully developed, and they can see all the different colors.
What are the other types of colorblindness?
Well, red-green is by far the most common. After that, there is blue-yellow colorblindness. The most rare type of colorblindness is called total colorblindness, which is the absence of all color.
For people with total colorblindness, everything they see is in different shades of gray.
Even less common than that is something called unilateral dichromacy. That means that one of your eyes sees normally while the other eye is colorblind. Can you think of any jobs that would be dangerous for someone who is colorblind?
I think it would be dangerous if you were a police or a firefighter.
Great answers. There are actually some jobs you can't do if you are colorblind. Examples of those jobs include a pilot, a firefighter, and an electrician. There are other jobs you can do if you're colorblind, but they would be a lot more difficult. Examples include a painter or a chef. We are super lucky to have a guest who can tell us a lot about what it's like to live with colorblindness. His name is Greg, and he is a substitute teacher from Kentucky. He has his own podcast called Substitute Teachers Lounge, which is a great resource for all teachers. You can find a link to his podcast in the show notes for this episode, so be sure to check it out.
Greg, thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. When did you discover that you were colorblind?
That's a great question, Olivia. I think I discovered I was colorblind maybe in my early teens when I realized dark colors, I had to have people tell me what color it was.
Do you have any family members that are also colorblind?
As far as I know, I don't have any other family members that are colorblind, but I have run into a lot of people that I work with who say they have that problem as well.
Does being colorblind ever make it harder for you to teach your students?
I don't really think my color blindness has made it more difficult to teach. In fact, it's given me some sharing opportunities through some brain game videos and that type of thing because we were able to talk about color blindness a little bit. Olivia, I think the most frustrating part about color blindness is not being able to enjoy seeing sunsets as much as others. And, I officiate sports, so sometimes some of the jerseys look very similar to me, even though they're really similar dark colors.
The question of the week is, how do you tell the difference between the different colors on the traffic light?
Well, Olivia, I don't struggle too much with stoplights because most of the ones in my area, the top is red and the bottom is green. But to be honest, it looks more like just dark and light to me.
Wow, that was amazing. A huge thanks to Greg for sharing his experiences with us. And thanks again to Anna for suggesting we get curious about colorblindness. It was a super interesting topic to learn about. Well, that's a wrap for this week's episode.
Thanks for listening to this week's podcast number 77 on colorblindness.
Great job, Olivia. Don't forget that next week is our big Season 3 finale. We have some thank yous and some big announcements to make, so you won't want to miss it. Join us next week to learn about the coronavirus. As always, thank you so much for listening and getting curious with us.